The Industrial Revolution took place throughout the late 1700s to early 1800s.
This brought about a time of great economic growth and new possibilities for the U.S. However, the new technologies and opportunities also brought about new problems. During this time, child labor was not heavily regulated.
It was not uncommon to see children working in mills, factories, canneries, farms, and coal mines.
Children were seen as a more desirable option for employment because they could be paid much less than adults and were easier to manage. In 1900, 18% of U.S. workers were under 16.
On April 25, 1904, Florence Kelley, Felix Adler, William H. Baldwin, and Edgar Gardner Murphy created the National Child Labor Committee from several existing state child labor initiatives. Its goal was simple: abolish child labor in the United States. Specifically, the committee aimed to effectively ban employment of children under 14 years of age, limit the workday to 8 hours, and impose minimum schooling requirements. To accomplish this, members investigated the main industries that utilized an underage workforce. Their findings were presented through photographs of the poor working conditions, accompanied by captions, lectures, and poster displays on tours throughout the U.S. They used this material along with pamphlets, leaflets, mass mailings, political cartoons, and sophisticated lobbying in an attempt to sway public opinion towards supporting legislation that would abolish child labor. The first industry targeted by the NCLC was Pennsylvania's anthracite coal. Anthracite coal was first discovered in South Pittston, Pennsylvania in the mid-1700s. Anthracite burns longer than other types of coal while producing virtually no emissions. It was used in the process of making steel, creating steam power for machine engines and trains, powering electricity plants, and heating homes. However, 3/4 of the world's known supply of anthracite at the time was located in a mere 500 square miles of northeastern Pennsylvania. This resulted in monumental opportunities for companies and a massive demand for labor.
There were some child labor laws put in place that required children to be 10 before they started working. However, a lot of families needed the money, so they would try to get around those laws by lying about the age of the child. So unfortunately, even sometimes after laws were put in place, they didn't necessarily become effective until later.
Because of these long hours, they didn't receive much in the way of education. The main jobs for boys were drivers who took care of mules, nippers who sat alone by the mine entrance and listened for cars, and breaker boys who sat hunched over chutes of coal moving downwards at high speeds, picking out rocks with their bare hands as the breaker boss watched them, ready to jab them with a stick or broom if they slowed down or talked.
Your fingernails, you had none. The ends of them would be bleeding every day you come from work.
Work was difficult and dangerous. In the mines, roofs and walls could collapse, explosives could be mishandled, and many gases could be deadly if inhaled. Nippers could easily lose fingers, hands, and legs. Breaker boys were sometimes ground in crushers, caught in machinery, or buried in streams of coal. By one estimate, one miner died every day in Pennsylvania anthracite mines by the mid-20th century. Work in both mines and breakers had long-term health risks, as the coal dust causes diseases like emphysema.
You didn't dare say anything. You didn't dare quit, because it was something to have a job.
According to the coroner's docket for Luzerne County in 1910, a 15-year-old boy named Charles Nogensky was caught in machinery while throwing coal at other boys. The company was free from all blame regarding the accident.
And if you got killed, well, it was just too bad. No mercy. They thought more of a mule than they did of a human being.
Owen Lovejoy, the Northern Secretary of the NCLC, was the first from the organization to investigate child labor in Pennsylvania coal fields in 1905. His reports regarding his visit called attention to the dangers that the boys faced and exposed the magnitude of the child labor issue. For example, when challenged by the National Civic Foundation, Lovejoy was able to produce a meticulous, well-founded estimate of the number of underage workers in the area, much higher than the number suggested by the coal companies. This simultaneously exposed the untrustworthiness of official sources, reinforced the NCLC's credibility, and raised awareness about the extent of the problem. He also highlighted a greater issue, an issue that would be the focus of the Child Labor Committee for many years to come. The welfare of the breaker boy is a very minor concern in the coal region, and readers of this paper must not suppose that child labor is a vital topic here. No subject is less frequently discussed. The churches are almost wholly silent. Nobody seems disposed to dodge the issue. No issue is recognized. Lovejoy's approach centered around using words to educate the public about the evils of child labor. To photographer Lewis Hine, words weren't enough. "If I could tell the story in words," he said, "I wouldn't need to lug a camera." Hine worked for the NCLC from 1907 to 1918, taking pictures of children at work. Many times, Hine had to lie, pretending to be a fire inspector or salesman in order to gain entrance into the facilities.
And I thought it was interesting how he had to, lie, basically.
While inside, he would claim to take photos of the equipment, having children stand in front as comparison. This also served to show just how small and unsuitable the children were for the machines.
Why is he wouldn't let him in? He's very clever, and he's obviously very determined.
When Hine visited the anthracite region in January of 1911, he was shocked to see the kinds of conditions the boys lived in. He later wrote, "While I was in the region, 2 breaker boys of 15 years while at work assigned to them fell or were carried by the cold down into the car below. One was badly burned and the other was smothered to death. This was at the Lee Breaker at Chauncey, Pennsylvania, January 6, 1911. The boy who was killed was Dennis McKee." The evidence seems to prove that he was working in another breaker before he was 14 years old. As horrifyingly graphic as this sounds, this was normal for the boys of the anthracite mines. As Walter Trotner put it, Hine's photos aroused public sentiment against child labor in a way that no printed page or public lecture could. After his 1911 visit, Pennsylvania passed stricter laws regarding child labor in education. These laws provided the catalyst that coal companies needed to start using machines in replacement of boys. The machine, known as jigs, did the work of 10 breaker boys, sorting through the coal with more precision. Even though it seemed like a small region, all that the NCLC was able to accomplish in the anthracite industry paved the way for future efforts in diminishing child labor. In the words of historian Hugh D. Hindman, the breaker boys who endured some of the most grueling conditions among child workers anywhere came to symbolize all that was wrong with child labor. These early successes gave the NCLC the momentum that drove them to direct their attention to passing national legislations.
What they did was make the plight of working children visible. And, we don't always get what we fight for right away, but what they did was create that wedge. And that wedge then made it possible as they were fighting for the rights of children. That wedge then turned into legislation.
The NCLC knew that effective legislations could only be passed if they had the support of the general public. In 1916, the Keating-Owen Act was passed. It declared the minimum age to work as 14 and limited work hours. Even though it was deemed as unconstitutional in 1918, causing a federal law that addressed child labor was a huge step in the right direction. After several unsuccessful attempts at creating a federal law that would abolish child labor, the Fair Labor Standards Act of 1938 was finally passed, making it illegal for children under the age of 14 to work. Without the efforts of the NCLC, it is likely that an effective national law would have been significantly delayed. Many more children would have had to endure the hardships of child labor. Today, breakers from the time period are no longer in use. Only a few remain as historical sites, such as the one located in Eckley Miners Village in Scranton, Pennsylvania. As Owen Lovejoy put it, every mine center affords many examples of strong, young lives, full of energy, rich in possibilities that, if wisely directed, might help to inspire men to that social awakening which is the sole hope of our democracy. But they will not be wisely directed. They will be dwarfed by a daily round of monotonous slate picking. Because of the NCLC, children now have a brighter future ahead of them, filled with endless possibilities.